Hello, and thank you for joining me for episode number 4 of the Principal Over Party YouTube podcast series. In this video, we're going to be going over the deep state and the secret war against the American people. With that being said, let's get right into the intro. So, the greatest threat to American freedom isn't always foreign. It isn't always a rival superpower or a terrorist group overseas. Sometimes it's much closer to home. I'm talking about the deep state, the network of unelected officials, shadowy bureaucrats, and powerful three-letter agencies like the CIA, FBI, and NSA that operate behind the curtain. These agencies were supposed to protect us. Instead, their history is filled with mind control experiments, illegal surveillance, propaganda, assassinations, and cover ups. And for every crime we know about, there are countless more that remain buried in classified files. From MKUltra to COINTELPRO, from the assassination of JFK to 9/11, from endless wars to mass surveillance, the record is clear. The deep state has its own agenda, and it doesn't always align with the American people's. In this video, we're going to uncover the dark history of these agencies, expose their crimes, and explore their conspiracies that refuse to die. Before, when power hides in the shadows, the only defense we have left is to question everything. Before diving into these theories and speculation, it's important to begin with what is undeniable: the crimes that the US intelligence agencies have already admitted to. These aren't rumors or fringe claims, they're documented programs exposed through investigations, whistleblowers, and congressional hearings. And if that is what they were willing to confess decades later, one has to wonder what still remains hidden. I'm going to begin with the CIA. Few agencies in American history have left a darker shadow than the Central Intelligence Agency. Created after World War II to protect national interests, the CIA quickly grew to a global power that often operated beyond accountability. Perhaps the most infamous example is MKUltra, running from 1953 to the early 1970s. MKUltra was a program of secret mind control experiments that involved drugging unsuspecting citizens with LSD and other substances. Victims included prisoners, psychiatric patients, and even children, none of whom were given informed consent. The program left lives shattered. One Army scientist, Frank Olson, died after being secretly dosed in what many believe was a CIA cover up. When the program began to unravel, the agency destroyed most of its files in 1973, ensuring the full scope of MKUltra may never be known to the public. Then there was Operation Mockingbird, a Cold War era effort to infiltrate American media. The CIA recruited prominent journalists, paid off editors, and ensured that news presented to the American public aligned with government interests. For decades, the supposedly independent press was a mouthpiece for intelligence narratives, blurring the line between journalism and propaganda. Beyond U.S. borders, the CIA made its presence felt in the form of foreign coups and assassinations. In 1953, the agency orchestrated the overthrow of Iran's democratically elected leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, after he threatened Western oil interests. A year later, they toppled Arbanez in Guatemala to protect the profits of the United Fruit Company. In 1973, the CIA supported General Pinochet's bloody coup against Chile's leader. In the Congo, they were implicated in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, and the nation's first democratically elected prime minister was gone. Time and time again, the CIA justified these actions as defending freedom, even as they plunged entire regions into decades of dictatorships, instability, and bloodshed. And at home, the agency has faced accusations of involvement in the drug trade, most famously during the 1980s. The Iran-Contra scandal exposed how the CIA literally funneled weapons to Nicaraguan rebels, using profits to fund covert wars in Latin America. Investigative journalist Gary Webb later revealed connections between these operations and the spread of crack cocaine here in the United States. His reporting, initially discredited, was later vindicated when government documents confirmed much of what he alleged. And it doesn't just stop there. Now we're going to talk about the FBI. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, often portrayed as the ultimate crime fighting institution, has its own dark history of suppressing dissent and undermining democracy. At the heart of it was COINTELPRO, the FBI's counterintelligence program that ran from the 1950s through the 1970s. It targeted civil rights leaders, leftist organizations, and anti-war activists. Martin Luther King Jr. was wiretapped and harassed relentlessly, even receiving an anonymous letter urging him to commit suicide. Malcolm X and the Black Panther Party were infiltrated and sabotaged, Native American activists and feminist groups likewise were attacked. FBI agents spread disinformation, forged letters, and sowed divisions in order to neutralize political movements that challenged the establishment. These tactics weren't surveillance, they were psychological warfare against American citizens. When the Black Panther leader Fred Hampton was assassinated during a police raid in Chicago in 1969, evidence later revealed that the FBI had played a role in setting him up. Behind it all was J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI's legendary director. Hoover maintained secret files on politicians, celebrities, and activists, using the threat of exposure as leverage. His power was so great that even presidents feared crossing him. The FBI under Hoover became less an impartial law enforcement agency and more a tool for silencing voices that threatened the status quo. That's just scratching the surface. If the CIA specialized in covert operations and the FBI in domestic suppression, the National Security Agency became the master of surveillance. For decades, rumors swirled that the NSA was listening to Americans' communications, but the agency consistently denied it. That illusion collapsed in 2013 when whistleblower Edward Snowden, I'm sure you're familiar with him, revealed that the NSA's PRISM program was real. The leaks showed that the NSA had tapped directly into the servers of tech giants like Google, Facebook, and Apple, collecting emails, chats, photos, and documents from millions of users. Phone companies like Verizon secretly handed over metadata, basically going over what people called, for how long, and from where. Even foreign leaders weren't safe. German Chancellor Angela Merkel's phone was among those who were tapped. The NSA had effectively created the largest warrantless surveillance system in history, in direct violation of the Fourth Amendment's protections against unreasonable search and seizure. Every text, every query, every digital footprint became potential data for the government to store and analyze. What I'm trying to get at here is that taken together, these histories of the CIA, FBI, and NSA reveal a chilling truth. The agencies designed to protect Americans have repeatedly turned their power inward, targeting the very people they were meant to serve. They drugged citizens, infiltrated the press, toppled governments, spied on civil rights leaders, and built surveillance machines that monitor millions without consent. And these are only the programs we know about, the ones exposed through leaks of whistleblowers or declassification over decades after the fact. If this is the official record, the question then becomes what remains hidden in the shadows of America's deep state? If the crimes of the CIA, FBI, and NSA show us anything, it's that these agencies have never been fully accountable to the people they claim to protect. They operate in shadowy spaces, often beyond the reach of elected officials or public oversight. This is where the idea of the deep state begins to take shape, a permanent government beneath the surface of democracy, one that persists regardless of which party wins election, who takes office, or whatever policies are being implemented locally. Congress and the courts are supposed to provide checks and balances, but intelligence agencies are experts at evasion. They classify documents, redact reports until they're unreadable, and bury scandals under claims of national security. Even when congressional committees like the Church Committee in the 1970s exposed programs such as MKUltra and COINTELPRO, the revelations came decades too late, long after the damage was done. The truth is that most Americans have no idea what these agencies are doing in real time. By the time we do learn, it's literally history, and that delay is intentional. Another way the deep state remains in power is through the revolving door between intelligence agencies, defense contractors, and politics. A CIA director retires and takes a cushy position at Lockheed Martin. A Pentagon official leaves the government only to join the board of Raytheon. Former generals and intelligence chiefs sit on cable news panels as experts, while still advising the very corporations profiting from war. This is a constant recycling of personnel, blurring the lines between public service and private profit. Decisions about war, surveillance, or weapon systems aren't made in a vacuum. They're made by people who stand to benefit personally. The deep state isn't just a network of spies, it's bureaucrats and people. This constant recycling of personnel blurs the line between public service and private profit. Decisions about war, surveillance, or weapon systems aren't made in a vacuum. They're made by people who stand to benefit personally. The deep state isn't just a network of spies and bureaucrats. It's a partnership with corporate America, one that turns war and surveillance into a business model. Then there are the so-called black budgets, secret funding streams hidden from the public. Each year, billions of dollars are allocated to intelligence agencies without any transparent accounting of how the money is spent. These funds are used for covert operation, advanced weapons research, cyber programs, and activities so secret that even many of the members of Congress are left in the dark. For perspective, in 2019, the U.S. intelligence community budget was over $80 billion, more than the GDP of many countries. Yet almost none of it subject to meaningful public oversight. This means that entire programs, even entire branches of government activity, can exist in secrecy, funded by taxpayers who will never know what their money is used for. Perhaps the most unsettling element of the shadow state is the series of continuity of government, or COG, programs. Born out of Cold War fears of nuclear war, these plans outline how the United States government would function if leaderships were wiped out. On paper, this makes sense. Every nation needs emergency plans and backups. But over the decade, COGS programs have expanded far beyond nuclear war scenarios. They involve secret bunkers, shadow chains of command, and emergency powers that can bypass the Constitution entirely. After 9/11, some of these measures were quietly activated, giving federal agencies extraordinary authority in the name of crisis response. This ties into long-running conspiracy theories about FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. While FEMA is supposed to handle disaster response, critics argue that under COG protocols, it could act like a skeleton of a future martial law government, a contingency plan for suspending normal freedoms in the event of emergency. Whether or not these fears are exaggerated, the lack of transparency fuels suspicion. The ultimate expression of the deep state's power is in its permanence. Presidents serve 4 to 8 years, senators and representatives rise and fall. But the machinery of intelligence, the network of spies, contractors, and bureaucrats, never goes away. This is why so many people bet elections change little. I mean, think between Obama and Trump and then Biden. Did really anything change aside from some social policies? Nothing. One administration may promise transparency, another may vow reform, but the wars continue. Surveillance grows, and the same figures that shuffle between government and corporate bedrooms still remain. These faces at the top may change, but the deep state remains. The shadow government is not a theory. It is a reality of how power functions when accountability disappears. Secret budgets, revolving doors, emergency powers, and institutional performances have become a system that exists beneath the surface of our democracy. It's not accountable to voters, it doesn't respond to public outrage, and it rarely changes course, no matter who occupies the Oval Office. And that's the terrifying truth. Presidents are temporary, the deep state is forever. For every documented crime of the American intelligence community, there are at least as many shadowy mysteries that refuse to fade. These aren't just idle speculations. They're theories that persist because the official explanations often leave behind contradictions, missing pieces, and unanswered questions. Whether you fully believe in them or not, they reveal a deep truth. When the state has a record of lying, people will always wonder what else they're hiding. Few moments in American history have inspired as much suspicion as the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. The official story, laid out by the Warren Commission, concluded that a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, killed Kennedy from the sixth floor of the Texas School Book Depository. Case closed. But even decades later, polls consistently show that most Americans don't buy it. Why? Because the gaps in the narrative are too glaring. Oswald himself had strange connections. He defected from the Soviet Union, returned to the United States, and may have had ties both to the CIA and FBI. Some believe he was a low-level intelligence asset or a patsy set up to take the fall. The CIA, meanwhile, has long been suspected of playing some role, especially given its bitter conflicts with Kennedy over Cuba and the Bay of Pigs fiasco. Documents declassified in the 1970s and testimony from the Church Committee raised even more doubts, showing that the CIA withheld information from investigators and may have been less honest about these contacts with Oswald than they first appeared. And then there's the mob connection. Organized crime bosses, furious with Kennedy's crackdown, had both motive and means. Some theories suggest a CIA mob collaboration to eliminate a president seen as a liability, and there's some great credibility to that story. The truth may never be known, but what is certain is this: the Warren Commission failed to put doubts to rest. And when a government has a history of secrecy with people, they will continue to ask questions. Another conspiracy theory that refuses to die surrounds the September 11th attacks. The official story is clear. 19 hijackers connected to Al Qaeda carried out the deadliest terror attack on U.S. soil in history. Yet, from the very beginning, many Americans suspected that there was more beneath the surface. Some point to Operation Northwoods, a declassified 1960s proposal in which the CIA actually suggested staging fake terror attacks, even downing U.S. planes to justify war with Cuba. Though the plan was never carried out, it proves false flag operations are not far beyond consideration. I mean, think about the Gulf of Tonkin incident. I mean, there is plenty of examples of the United States subverting its population in order to go for war. With that history in mind, skeptics of 9/11 have asked uncomfortable questions. Why were there so many intelligence warnings beforehand that seemed to go ignored? Why did the attacks conveniently justify pre existing agendas, from the invasion of Iraq to the passage of the Patriot Act? Why did Saudi Arabia, home of 15 of the 19 hijackers, face so little scrutiny compared to other nations? For some, 9/11 was not merely a terror attack, but a catalyst, an event used to justify endless wars abroad and a surveillance state at home. Whether you accept the inside job theory or not, the undeniable truth is that the tragedy was weaponized to expand government power in ways that still shape our world today. The deep state shadow looms large over many other controversies. To kick one off that everyone probably loves, including myself, Area 51 and UFO secrecy. For decades, the government denied even the existence of Area 51, only later to admit it. Recent disclosures and military footage have reignited debates, with some alleging the CIA's disinformation campaigns are implemented to muddy the waters on what the government truly knows about UFOs. And if you're interested in that topic, go check out a channel called the Y Files. They do a fantastic job at deep diving into these conspiracy theories. Another big one, especially relevant today, would be Jeffrey Epstein. His arrest and mysterious death in prison fueled widespread belief that he was connected to intelligence blackmail operations, especially in accordance with Israel. With documented ties to powerful figures in politics, business, and even intelligence circles, many believe Epstein was part of a system designed to compromise and control the elite. And the last one is pretty relevant to me: mass shootings and false flag debates. Perhaps the most controversial of all, some argue that certain high profile shootings are manipulated or staged as psychological operations, psyops, to punish and promote political agendas. While these claims are deeply decisive and often inflammatory, they underscore how little trust remains between the public and its institutions. For me, look into the Las Vegas shooting. It is one of the most bizarre things that had ever happened in my lifetime. The largest mass shooting in U.S. history. The guy carried up hundreds of pounds of ammunition, used the bump stock, but when you hear the audio, it's clearly fake. Essentially, what I'm trying to say here is that each of these conspiracies persist because of the official narratives that leave room for doubt. And when people already know their government has lied about a whole bunch of things, MKUltra, COINTELPRO, Iran-Contra, mass surveillance, skepticism is not paranoia. It's a survival mechanism. Whether it's JFK, 9/11, UFO secrecy, Epstein, the common thread is this: secrecy breeds distrust, and the more the deep state hides, the more people will assume the worst. Platforms once hailed as tools for free expression have become digital battlegrounds where agencies quietly decide what you can and cannot see. And then there's the new war on domestic extremism. After the war on terror began to lose steam overseas, the same playbook was redeployed at home. The definition of extremism has been stretched so thin that almost anyone can fit the label. Activists, protesters, critics of government policy, protesters for Israel. Under this umbrella, surveillance that was once justified by Al Qaeda or ISIS is now aimed at American citizens. And here's the part that's most disturbing: every scandal follows the same predictable pattern. Begin to pick up on this. First, the lie. Officials deny and doing any wrong. Then, the cover up. Files are destroyed. Whistleblowers are silenced. Journalists smeared. And finally, decades later, a partial admission. And by then, the damage is irreversible. The agencies responsible have already moved on to the next covert operation. This is the result in a system where accountability never truly arrives, and secrecy becomes the default. I want to talk about why this all matters today. It's tempting to look at MKUltra, COINTELPRO, and even the Iran-Contra scandal as relics of the past, dark chapters we since learned from and moved on. But these aren't just history lessons. The same agencies that ran those programs are still alive and well today, and their methods have only evolved with technology. Take social media. We know from the Twitter files that the federal agencies like the FBI and DHS flagged posts to be removed or throttled. Stories about Hunter Biden's laptop were varying before the 2020 election. COVID narratives that strayed away from the government's preferred messaging were labeled as misinformation and suppressed. And secrecy becomes the default. These agencies aren't protecting democracy, they're shaping it, managing it, and at times undermining it in the shadows. That's why this matters today, because the deep state isn't a ghost of the Cold War or some figment of our imagination. It's here, it's active, and it's adapting to the digital age. The question is not whether propaganda, surveillance, and covert manipulation are happening right now. It's how much of it will we ever actually see and recognize. The evidence is impossible to ignore. The deep state is not just a conspiracy theory whispered in the fringes of society. It's a system of unaccountable power that has operated in the shadows for decades. The CIA, FBI, and NSA have all left behind trails of lies, cover ups, and abuses of power. Some of these programs have been confirmed beyond doubt. Others live on as theories because the full truth has never been allowed into the light. And that's the point. Secrecy is the lifeblood of the deep state. Presidents come and go, policies shift, but the machine still endures. It adapts, evolves, and expands, always protecting its own interest above all else. There's a quote I like to keep coming back to: the government is not your friend, it's its own friend. That's why my challenge to you is simple but powerful. Every time you hear an official story, don't just accept it, stop and ask. Who benefits if I believe this? Because if history has taught us something or anything at all, it's that America's most dangerous enemies don't always live overseas. Sometimes they wear the three-letter agencies on their badge. So if this video made you think differently, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your own thoughts, stories, or theories about the deep state. I'm a huge conspiracy theorist, so I'd love to hear from y'all. Do you think it's worse than we know? Do you think it's exaggerated? Let's talk about it. And if you found value here, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who still thinks the government is always telling the truth. I'm looking at you, people over the age of 45. Because power never stops lying, and free people never stop asking questions. Thank you so much for joining me, and God bless.